My name is Jessica Williams, I'm 26 years old, and I thought I was coming home from the best business trip of my career. Instead, I found my entire life packed into garbage bags sitting at our front gate like trash waiting for pickup. My mother was standing there with her arms crossed, looking at me like I was a stranger who had wandered onto her property by mistake. "You're not welcome here anymore, Jessica," she said coldly. "Emma told me everything about how you really feel about this family. Before we dive into this absolutely wild story of family betrayal and the incredible revenge that followed, I need you to predict what you think happened here. What could my little sister Emma have possibly told my mother to make her throw me out like garbage? Drop your guesses in the comments, smash that like button, and subscribe because this story has more twists than a pretzel factory, and the way justice gets served is absolutely perfect. To understand how I ended up staring at my life in garbage bags, you need to know about my family dynamic. Emma has always been Mom's precious baby, 3 years younger than me and somehow completely exempt from any real responsibility or consequences for her actions. Growing up, I was the one who did chores without being asked, maintained a 4.0 GPA, and worked part-time jobs throughout high school to save for college. Emma was the one who got away with everything because she was still finding herself and needed extra support to reach her potential. When I graduated high school as valedictorian, Mom threw a small family dinner. When Emma barely graduated with a 2.1 GPA, Mom threw her a huge party and invited the entire extended family to celebrate her overcoming academic challenges. I put myself through college with a combination of scholarships, student loans, and working 30 hours a week at a campus bookstore. Meanwhile, Mom paid for Emma's first year at a private art school that cost more than my entire 4-year degree. When Emma dropped out after 2 semesters because the classes were too structured and stifled her creativity, Mom didn't even seem disappointed. She just said Emma was exploring different paths and would find her calling eventually. After college, I landed a great job at a marketing firm in the city, but I chose to stay living at home for a while to help with expenses and save money for my own place. Mom had been struggling financially since Dad died 4 years ago, and I felt responsible for helping out. I contributed $800 a month for rent and utilities, did most of the grocery shopping, and handled repairs around the house that Mom couldn't afford to hire professionals for. Emma, meanwhile, had been taking a break from school and life for the past 2 years. She slept until noon, spent her days watching Netflix and scrolling social media, and contributed exactly nothing to the household financially or otherwise. When I'd suggest she get even a part-time job, Mom would defend her by saying Emma was dealing with depression and needed time to heal from the pressure of unrealistic expectations. The irony wasn't lost on me that my realistic expectations of contributing to society were somehow harmful, while Emma's complete lack of any expectations was considered healthy support. About 6 months ago, things started to shift in a way that made me uncomfortable. Emma began having more private conversations with Mom, often stopping abruptly when I walked into the room. Mom started asking me pointed questions about my job, my social life, and my future plans, not in a caring way, but in a suspicious, almost interrogative manner. "Jessica, your coworkers seem to keep you very busy," Mom would say. "Are you sure you're not just avoiding spending time with family? Emma mentioned that you've been working a lot of overtime lately. I hope you're not developing workaholic tendencies like your father. It's interesting how you always seem to have plans with friends on weekends. Emma is always here, available for family time." I started noticing that Emma would position herself as the helpful, present daughter while subtly highlighting my supposed shortcomings. When I'd come home from a long day at work, Emma would already be helping Mom with dinner, something she never did before. When I'd go out with friends on Friday nights, Emma would make a point of staying home for family movie night and suggesting that I was becoming distant from family values. The most disturbing change was how Mom started treating my financial contributions to the household. Instead of appreciating my help, she began acting like I was somehow taking advantage of her generosity by living at home. She'd make comments like most people your age are independent and it's nice that Emma isn't in a rush to abandon family like some people. This was particularly galling because Emma wasn't contributing anything while I was essentially subsidizing her lifestyle. My rent money was keeping the lights on and food in the refrigerator that Emma consumed without contributing to or even acknowledging. 3 months ago, Emma announced she wanted to redecorate her space and asked if she could move into my childhood bedroom because it was bigger and had better natural light. I was shocked that she'd even ask, and more shocked when Mom seemed to think it was a reasonable request. "Jessica, you're hardly ever here anyway," Mom said. "And Emma is really trying to establish a more positive living environment for her mental health journey." I firmly said no, explaining that it was my room, I was paying rent, and I had no intention of giving up my space so Emma could have a bigger area for her art projects that never materialized into anything productive. That conversation seemed to mark the beginning of the end of my welcome in my own home. Looking back now, I realize that Emma had been systematically positioning herself as the devoted daughter while painting me as the selfish, absent one who took advantage of Mom's kindness. She was playing a long game that I didn't even realize was happening until I found my life in garbage bags at the front gate. Standing at the gate with my belongings scattered around me like the aftermath of a tornado, I demanded answers from Mom about what exactly Emma had told her to justify this dramatic eviction. "Don't act innocent, Jessica," Mom said, her voice colder than I'd ever heard it. "Emma showed me the messages where you called me controlling and said you couldn't wait to escape this toxic family. She showed me where you complained to your friends about having to live with your pathetic mother and your loser sister." My mouth fell open. "What messages?" "Mom, I never said any of those things. I would never say those things." "Emma has the screenshots," Mom continued, gaining momentum as she recited what were obviously Emma's talking points. "You think I'm stupid, but I can see how you really feel about us. Coming home late, always on your phone, acting like you're doing us some huge favor by living here. Mom, I pay rent. I buy groceries. I fixed the washing machine last month and painted the bathroom. How is any of that taking advantage of you?" But Mom had clearly been thoroughly convinced by whatever evidence Emma had fabricated. She refused to show me these supposed screenshots and dismissed my protests as more manipulation and gaslighting. After 2 hours of getting nowhere with Mom, I loaded my garbage bags into my car and drove to my best friend Maya's apartment. Maya had known our family for years and was as shocked as I was by this sudden turn of events. "Jess, this is insane," Maya said as we carried my belongings up to her spare room. "Your mom has always been a little biased toward Emma, but this is like she's become a completely different person." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the alleged screenshots Emma had shown Mom. I knew I had never written anything negative about my family, so where had these messages come from? The next morning, I decided to do some investigation. First, I checked my phone and social media accounts for any messages that could have been taken out of context. There was nothing, not even venting sessions with friends that could be twisted to look bad. I'm naturally pretty private about family issues, and I tend to focus on positive things when I talk about my life. Then I started thinking about the technical aspects of Emma's evidence. Screenshots can be faked pretty easily with basic photo editing skills or even just by changing contact names in phones. Emma had always been good with technology, and she'd had months to prepare whatever lies she was planning to tell. I called my cousin Marcus, who works in IT security, and asked him about fake text message screenshots. "Oh, that's super easy," he said. "There are websites where you can generate fake iPhone or Android conversations that look completely real. You just type in whatever names and messages you want, and it creates screenshots that are almost impossible to distinguish from real ones unless you know what to look for." Armed with this information, I decided to gather my own evidence. I started by reaching out to friends and family members to see what they'd been told about my supposed departure from the family. My Aunt Linda, Mom's younger sister, was the first person I called. "Jessica. Honey, we've been so worried about you. Your mother said you moved out of state for work and didn't want to maintain contact with the family anymore." "Aunt Linda, I'm still in town. I've been living at home until this week, and I definitely haven't cut contact with anyone." The silence on the other end of the line was telling. "Jessica, what exactly is going on?" Your mother specifically told us at Easter that you'd taken a job in California and asked the family not to reach out because you needed space to build your new life. Easter had been 6 weeks ago, and I had definitely been there, helping Mom cook dinner and chatting with relatives throughout the day. But apparently, Emma had spun an entirely different narrative about my plans and attitude. I started making more calls and discovered that Emma had been telling different lies to different people, all designed to isolate me from potential support systems. To some relatives, I had moved away and didn't want contact. To others, I had become too busy with work to care about family. To Mom's friends, I was going through a selfish phase and being disrespectful to my mother. The most damaging discovery came when I talked to Mrs. Patterson, our elderly neighbor who had always been like a grandmother to Emma and me. "Oh dear," she said when I called her, "I'm so sorry to hear about your troubles with substance abuse. Your mother mentioned you'd been struggling with addiction and that's why you've been acting out lately." Substance abuse? I barely drink alcohol and have never used any kind of drugs. But Emma had apparently added addiction to her list of fictional Jessica problems, probably to explain away any erratic behavior that might contradict her narrative. As I documented each lie, I realized Emma hadn't just been manipulating Mom, she'd been systematically destroying my reputation with everyone who mattered to our family. She'd created a comprehensive alternate reality where I was the problem child who had abandoned, insulted, and disappointed everyone who loved me. But Emma had made one crucial mistake in her campaign of lies: she'd been too thorough. The stories she told different people didn't line up, and the timeline of events didn't make sense when you compared all the different versions. I spent the next 3 days creating a detailed timeline of Emma's lies, complete with witness statements from family and friends who could confirm what they'd been told versus what had actually happened. I also started looking into the financial aspects of our family situation, because something about Mom's sudden hostility toward my contributions didn't add up. What I discovered about our family's finances made Emma's betrayal even more sinister than I'd initially realized. The complete story. While I was staying at Maya's apartment and documenting Emma's lies, I decided to check my credit report just to make sure Emma's deception hadn't extended beyond character assassination. What I found made my blood run cold. There were 3 credit cards on my report that I had never opened, with a combined balance of over $12,000. There was also a personal loan for $8,000 that I definitely hadn't applied for. All of these accounts had been opened within the past 6 months, right around the time Emma started having those private conversations with Mom. I immediately called the credit card companies and discovered that the applications had been submitted using my social security number and personal information, but with Mom listed as a cosigner and authorized user. The addresses on the accounts were our family home, and the phone number was Mom's cell phone. "Ma'am," the customer service representative explained, "these accounts were opened with proper documentation and your mother's signature as co-applicant. The cards were mailed to the address on file, and the account has been actively used for purchases at retail stores, restaurants, and online shopping. Someone had been living it up on my credit while I was working 50-hour weeks and contributing to household expenses. I didn't need to be a detective to figure out who." I requested detailed statements for all the fraudulent accounts and found a pattern of spending that clearly wasn't Mom's style. Expensive makeup from Sephora, designer clothes from Nordstrom, frequent DoorDash orders, and multiple purchases from gaming and electronics stores. This was definitely Emma's spending, but somehow using my credit with Mom's co-signature. The personal loan was even more infuriating. The paperwork showed it was supposedly for home improvements, but I knew for a fact that no home improvements had been made. Our house still had the same broken deck railing, peeling paint in the kitchen, and leaky bathroom faucet that I'd been promising to fix when I had time. That $8,000 had gone somewhere else entirely. But the most shocking discovery came when I decided to check my old bank account, the one I'd opened as a minor with Mom as the co-owner, which I'd stopped using after college when I opened my own adult account. I assumed it was closed or empty, but when I called the bank, I learned it was still active and had been receiving regular deposits. "Ms. Williams, your account shows consistent direct deposits from Williams Marketing Solutions, as well as several manual deposits over the past year," the bank representative told me. Williams Marketing Solutions was my employer, but I hadn't used that account for payroll in over 3 years. Someone had changed my direct deposit information without my knowledge, routing part of my paycheck into an account that Mom had access to as co-owner. I requested statements going back 12 months and discovered that approximately $400 from each of my paychecks had been diverted to this old account. Over the course of a year, that was nearly $10,000 of my money that I thought I'd been depositing into my personal savings. But the money wasn't just sitting there, it was being withdrawn regularly through ATM transactions and online transfers. Someone with access to the account had been systematically stealing my earnings while I believed I was struggling to save money due to living expenses. When I confronted my payroll department about the direct deposit change, they showed me a form with my forged signature authorizing the split deposit. The signature was close enough to mine that it had passed their verification, but I could see subtle differences that indicated someone had been practicing my handwriting. Emma had access to documents with my signature from years of living in the same house. She'd seen my signature on birthday cards, school papers, and official documents countless times. With some practice, she could probably forge it well enough to fool people who weren't specifically looking for fraud. The financial picture that emerged was staggering. Emma had stolen close to $10,000 directly from my paychecks, racked up over $20,000 in debt using my credit, and had been living a lifestyle funded entirely by my work while contributing nothing to the family herself. But the most insidious part was how she'd used Mom as an unwitting accomplice. By having Mom co-sign for credit cards and being listed on my old bank account, Emma had created a paper trail that made it look like Mom was aware of and involved in these financial arrangements. When Mom accused me of taking advantage of her generosity, she probably genuinely believed that I was somehow benefiting financially from living at home, not realizing that Emma was actively stealing from me while I was also paying rent and expenses. I started to understand why Mom had become so hostile toward my financial contributions to the household. If Emma had convinced her that I was secretly keeping money that should have been going to family expenses, then my $800 monthly rent would seem inadequate rather than generous. Emma had created a perfect storm of manipulation. She'd made herself look like the devoted daughter who stayed home to care for Mom, while making me look like the selfish daughter who was taking advantage of the family financially and emotionally. Meanwhile, she was literally living off money stolen from me while Mom unknowingly provided the legal cover for the theft. I printed out all the financial evidence and added it to my growing file of documentation. Credit reports, bank statements, forged signatures, and fraudulent applications painted a clear picture of systematic identity theft and financial abuse. But I still needed to prove that Emma was the mastermind behind all of this, not Mom. I needed evidence that would show Mom was being manipulated rather than being a willing participant in the theft. That's when I decided to involve someone Mom would trust implicitly, someone whose word she would never doubt and who had the standing to demand answers without being dismissed as a vindictive daughter. The next morning, I called my Aunt Linda, Mom's younger sister and the person in our family who had always been the voice of reason during conflicts. Linda was a retired school principal who didn't tolerate nonsense from anyone, and more importantly, she was one of the few people whose judgment Mom respected without question. "Aunt Linda," I said, "I need your help with something serious. Emma has been lying to Mom about me, and I think she's been stealing money from both of us." I spent an hour walking Linda through everything I'd discovered, the fake screenshots, the lies told to family members, the financial fraud, and Mom's sudden personality change toward me. Linda listened without interrupting, asking only a few clarifying questions about dates and amounts. "Jessica, this is very serious," Linda said when I finished. "If even half of what you're telling me is true, Emma has committed multiple felonies. But more importantly, she's manipulated your mother into believing terrible things about you." Linda agreed to help me gather more evidence, but she warned me that we needed to be absolutely certain before confronting Mom. "Your mother has been through a lot since your father died," Linda explained. "If she realizes she's been completely deceived by Emma, it could devastate her. We need to make sure we have irrefutable proof." The first step was getting access to Mom's house to look for evidence without alerting Emma to our investigation. Linda called Mom and arranged to visit for lunch the next day, specifically requesting that Emma join them for family bonding time. This would give me an opportunity to search Emma's room and the computer. Maya agreed to help with the reconnaissance mission. She would wait in the car as a lookout while I quickly searched for evidence. If Emma and Mom returned unexpectedly, Maya would text me a warning. The next afternoon, while Linda kept Mom and Emma occupied at a restaurant across town, I let myself into the house using my old key. Being back in my childhood home felt surreal. Emma had already moved her belongings into my old room, completely erasing any trace of my presence. In Emma's former room, which she'd apparently been using as an office, I found a treasure trove of evidence. Her laptop was open and unlocked, displaying email conversations that made my stomach turn. Emma had been corresponding with someone named Derek about the plan working perfectly and Mom totally buying the story about Jessica being ungrateful. In one email, Derek had written, "Your sister sounds like she was too good for her own good." Sometimes responsible people make the best targets because no one expects them to fight back. This suggested that Emma's manipulation wasn't just spontaneous vindictiveness, it was a calculated scheme that she'd planned with someone else's input. I took photos of the email conversations and kept searching. In a folder labeled Important Documents, I found printed copies of my credit applications with forged signatures, practice sheets where Emma had been perfecting my handwriting, and a notebook with detailed timelines of lies she'd told to different family members. The notebook was particularly damning because it showed Emma's systematic approach to isolating me from support systems. She had different stories for different people, and she'd kept careful notes to make sure she didn't contradict herself when talking to relatives who might compare notes. But the most shocking discovery was a voice recording app on Emma's phone that contained hours of audio files. When I played a few of them, I realized Emma had been secretly recording conversations with Mom, then editing them to create evidence of my supposed disrespectful behavior. In one audio file, I could hear my own voice from a phone conversation with Mom, but it had been edited to remove context and string together sentences that made it sound like I was complaining about family obligations. Emma had recorded Mom's side of our phone calls, then used audio editing software to create fake conversations that supported her lies. The technical sophistication of Emma's deception was far beyond what I'd expected. This wasn't just a young woman making impulsive lies, this was a methodical campaign of psychological warfare against her own sister. I photographed everything I could find and copied the audio files to my phone before carefully putting everything back exactly as I'd found it. As I was preparing to leave, I noticed something else: prescription bottles in Emma's desk drawer with Mom's name on them, but half the pills were missing. The medications were for anxiety and sleep disorders, prescriptions that Mom had been taking since Dad died to help with grief and insomnia. If Emma had been controlling Mom's access to these medications, she could have been manipulating Mom's mental state to make her more susceptible to suggestion and paranoia. I have to pause here because what I discovered next was so shocking that it changed everything I thought I knew about this situation. Emma hadn't just been lying and stealing, she'd been systematically drugging and manipulating our mother to make her easier to control. If you think this story has been wild so far, just wait until you see what happened when I finally had enough evidence to expose the truth. Make sure you're subscribed because the confrontation that's coming will absolutely blow your mind, and the way justice gets served is more satisfying than anything you've ever seen. When I got back to Maya's apartment, I spent hours organizing all the evidence I'd gathered. Photos of forged documents, copies of financial fraud, witness statements from family members about Emma's lies, and now audio recordings that proved Emma had been manufacturing fake evidence against me. But I still needed one more piece of the puzzle. I needed to prove that Emma was manipulating Mom's medication and mental state. That evidence would require help from someone with medical expertise who could document the effects of medication tampering. I called my cousin Rachel, who was a registered nurse at the local hospital. When I explained what I suspected about Emma controlling Mom's prescription medications, Rachel immediately understood the seriousness of the situation. "Jessica, if Emma has been giving your mother inconsistent doses of anxiety and sleep medications, it could explain the personality changes you've described," Rachel said. Those medications affect cognitive function and decision-making, especially in older adults. Manipulating someone's medication to control their behavior is a form of abuse. Rachel agreed to help me document Mom's condition and potentially get her medical evaluation if necessary. She also connected me with a social worker who specialized in elder abuse cases, since manipulating a vulnerable adult's medication and finances qualified as abuse under state law. By the end of the week, I had built a case that would make it impossible for Emma to deny what she'd done or for Mom to continue believing Emma's lies. But I needed to plan the confrontation carefully. Emma was clearly more manipulative and dangerous than I'd ever imagined, and cornering her might cause her to escalate her behavior in unpredictable ways. That's when Aunt Linda suggested we involve the rest of the family in exposing Emma's lies. If we could get multiple family members to confront Emma with her contradictory stories simultaneously, she wouldn't be able to spin new lies fast enough to explain away all the evidence. Aunt Linda proved to be the perfect ally for organizing a family intervention. As the second oldest sibling in Mom's generation and someone who had maintained relationships with extended family, she had the credibility and connections needed to rally support for exposing Emma's deception. "I've been talking to your other aunts and uncles," Linda told me over coffee. "Everyone has been concerned about the changes in your mother's behavior over the past few months. She's been distant, paranoid, and saying things about you that just don't match the Jessica we've all known for 26 years. Linda had reached out to Mom's 3 sisters and 2 brothers, sharing the evidence I'd gathered without revealing that I was the source. She presented it as her own investigation into concerning changes in the family dynamic that had raised red flags for multiple relatives. The response was immediate and unanimous. Everyone had noticed that Mom seemed different, and everyone had been troubled by the negative things she'd been saying about me. More importantly, several family members had caught Emma in contradictory lies about my supposed behavior and whereabouts. Uncle Mark, Mom's youngest brother, had been particularly suspicious of Emma's stories. "That girl has never been able to keep her lies straight," he told Linda. "She told me Jessica had moved to California for work, but then 2 days later she mentioned Jessica being rude at Easter dinner. Jessica can't be both in California and at Easter dinner." Aunt Carol had similar concerns about Emma's financial claims. "Emma told me Jessica wasn't contributing to household expenses anymore, but I saw Jessica buying groceries for your mother just last month. Something doesn't add up." As Linda coordinated with our extended family, I worked with Maya to build a timeline of Emma's contradictory statements and forged evidence. Maya, who worked in digital marketing, helped me create a presentation that clearly laid out the pattern of deception and financial fraud. "Jess, this is like watching someone build a house of cards," Maya observed as we organized the evidence. "Emma created so many lies that she couldn't possibly keep track of them all. One good push and the whole structure collapses." The most valuable ally turned out to be Mrs. Patterson, our elderly neighbor who had always been close to our family. When Linda approached her about the situation, Mrs. Patterson revealed that she'd been documenting concerning behavior from Emma for weeks. "I've been watching that girl come and go at odd hours," Mrs. Patterson told us. "She leaves the house every morning like she's going to work, but then I see her at the mall or the coffee shop, clearly not working. She's been lying about having a job." Mrs. Patterson had also noticed men coming to the house to meet with Emma, men who didn't look like they belonged in our quiet suburban neighborhood. "They looked like debt collectors or worse," she said. "I was worried about your mother's safety." This information aligned with my suspicions about Emma's gambling debts and financial troubles. If Emma owed money to dangerous people, that would explain why she'd been so desperate to steal from me and manipulate Mom into supporting her financially. Rachel, my nurse cousin, had been quietly observing Mom during family gatherings and confirmed that Mom's behavior was consistent with medication tampering. "Your mother shows signs of inconsistent medication compliance," Rachel explained. "Some days she seems anxious and paranoid, other days she's unusually drowsy or confused. That's what happens when someone's medication schedule is being manipulated." By the end of the week, we had assembled a formidable support network. 6 family members who could testify to Emma's contradictory lies, a neighbor who had witnessed suspicious behavior, a medical professional who could speak to Mom's altered mental state, and documentation of systematic financial fraud. But Aunt Linda suggested one final step before confronting Emma directly. "We should give your mother a chance to see some of this evidence privately first," she said. "If we can get her away from Emma's influence for a few hours and show her the proof of what's been happening, she might be more receptive to the truth." Linda arranged for Mom to visit her house for sister bonding time, explicitly asking Emma not to come along. This would give us a controlled environment to present some of the evidence to Mom without Emma being able to immediately counteract it with new lies. The plan was simple but potentially risky. Linda would start by showing Mom the contradictory stories Emma had told different family members, then gradually introduce the financial evidence and proof of forged documents. If Mom was receptive to seeing the truth, we could proceed with a full family confrontation. If she remained convinced by Emma's lies, we would need to consider involving legal authorities before attempting a family intervention. "Jessica," Linda warned me, "you need to be prepared for the possibility that your mother will initially reject this evidence. Emma has been manipulating her for months, and victims of manipulation often defend their abusers even when faced with proof." I understood the risk, but I also knew that this was probably my only chance to save my relationship with Mom and stop Emma from causing further damage to our family. Emma's behavior was escalating, and if we didn't intervene soon, she might cause irreversible harm. The night before Linda's planned conversation with Mom, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how different my life had been just 2 weeks earlier, when my biggest concern was saving enough money to move into my own apartment. Now I was preparing to expose my own sister as a criminal who had systematically destroyed my relationship with our mother. But I also felt something I hadn't experienced in months: hope. For the first time since finding my belongings in garbage bags, I wasn't fighting this battle alone. I had family members who believed in me, friends who supported me, and evidence that would make it impossible for Emma to continue her lies. The truth was finally going to come out, and Emma was about to discover that manipulating vulnerable people has consequences. Linda's conversation with Mom didn't go as smoothly as we'd hoped, but it planted the first seeds of doubt that would eventually grow into recognition of the truth. "Your mother was resistant at first," Linda told me afterward. "Emma has done a very thorough job of convincing her that you're the problem. But when I showed her the different stories Emma told different family members, I could see the confusion starting." Mom had initially defended Emma's contradictory statements, claiming that people must have misunderstood or that the family was ganging up on Emma out of jealousy. But when Linda presented the timeline of lies alongside bank statements showing the fraudulent accounts, Mom's certainty began to waver. I could see her trying to reconcile what Emma had told her with the evidence in front of her, Linda explained. She kept saying things like, "But Emma showed me," and then trailing off when she couldn't explain away the contradictions. The breakthrough came when Linda showed Mom the forged signatures on my credit applications. Mom knew my handwriting intimately from years of signing school papers and birthday cards, and even she could see that the signatures were close but not quite right. "That's when I saw the first real crack in Emma's story," Linda said. "Your mother looked at those signatures for a long time, and then she asked me where I got these documents." Linda had been honest about how we'd obtained the evidence, explaining that I had discovered the financial fraud through my credit report and that family members had started comparing notes about Emma's contradictory stories. She emphasized that this wasn't an attack on Emma, but a genuine concern for the family's welfare. By the end of their conversation, Mom hadn't fully accepted that Emma had been lying, but she'd agreed to look at more evidence and to ask Emma directly about some of the inconsistencies. More importantly, she'd agreed to let me come to the house for a family meeting where everyone could discuss the situation openly. "I think she's starting to see that something isn't right," Linda told me. "But Emma has had months to build this narrative, so it's going to take time to tear it down." We scheduled the family meeting for Saturday afternoon, giving everyone time to prepare and ensuring that multiple family members could attend as witnesses. Linda would facilitate the discussion, and I would present the evidence systematically, starting with the least threatening information and building up to the most damning proof. Saturday morning, I was a nervous wreck. Maya helped me organize my evidence into a clear presentation, and Rachel came along for moral support and to observe Mom's condition. Uncle Mark and Aunt Carol also agreed to attend, bringing the total number of family witnesses to 5 people who could confirm Emma's contradictory stories. When we arrived at the house at 2 p.m., Emma was clearly caught off guard by the number of people. She'd probably expected a small family discussion that she could control with her usual manipulation tactics. Instead, she found herself facing a room full of relatives who were all looking at her with suspicion. "What's going on?" Emma asked, trying to maintain her innocent facade. "Why is everyone here?" Mom looked uncomfortable but determined. "Emma, there seem to be some inconsistencies in things you've told different family members about Jessica. We need to clear up the confusion." I could see Emma's mind racing as she tried to figure out how much we knew and what story she should tell. This was the moment when her house of lies would either hold together or collapse completely. Linda started gently, asking Emma to explain why she'd told Uncle Mark that I had moved to California while telling Aunt Carol that I was still living at home but being disrespectful. Emma tried to claim that people had misunderstood her, but when confronted with direct quotes from multiple family members, her explanations became increasingly desperate. "I think I may have confused dates," Emma said. "Jessica was planning to move to California, so I might have mentioned it as if it had already happened." "But you told me last week that Jessica was at Easter dinner being rude to Mom," Uncle Mark pointed out. "How could she be at Easter dinner if she'd moved to California?" Emma's face flushed as she struggled to explain the contradiction. Maybe I was talking about Easter from a previous year?" That's when I pulled out the photos of the forged credit applications. "Emma, can you explain why my signature appears on these credit card applications that I never filled out?" The color drained from Emma's face as she stared at the documents. She tried to claim she'd never seen them before, but when I showed her the notebook from her room with the handwriting practice sheets, she realized she was trapped. "Okay, fine." Emma suddenly exploded, abandoning her innocent act entirely. "Yes, I used your credit to get some cards. But you owe this family for all the years Mom supported you. You act like you're so generous paying $800 a month, but that doesn't even cover half the real expenses." The mask was finally off, and Emma's true personality emerged. She was bitter, entitled, and completely lacking in empathy or remorse for what she'd done. "Emma," Mom said quietly, "you told me Jessica wasn't contributing anything to household expenses. She wasn't contributing enough." Emma shot back. "She has this great job and acts like she's doing us a favor by living here. I've been stuck taking care of you while she gets to have her perfect career." "Taking care of me how?" Mom's voice was getting stronger. "Emma, you don't have a job. You sleep until noon and spend your days shopping. I keep you company. I'm here when you need emotional support. That's worth something." That's when I played the edited audio recordings from Emma's phone, the conversations where she'd manipulated Mom's words to create fake evidence against me. Hearing her own voice being used to manufacture lies was the final straw for Mom. "Emma," Mom said, her voice shaking with anger and hurt, "you recorded my private phone conversations with Jessica and edited them to make it sound like she was insulting me?" Emma tried to claim the recordings were taken out of context, but the evidence was overwhelming. When Rachel presented her observations about Mom's inconsistent medication compliance and the missing pills from Emma's room, the full scope of Emma's manipulation became clear. "You've been controlling my medication?" Mom stood up, her face pale with shock and rage. "You've been making me feel confused and paranoid so I'd believe your lies about Jessica?" Emma's final defense was to play the victim. "Mom, you have to understand, I was trying to protect you. Jessica was going to abandon you once she saved enough money to move out. I was trying to make sure you had someone who really cared about you." "By stealing from her? By forging documents? By drugging me?" Mom's voice was getting louder with each question. "Emma, what you've done is criminal." The confrontation lasted 3 hours, with Emma's lies unraveling one by one as we presented evidence she couldn't explain away. By the end, even Emma seemed exhausted from trying to maintain her false narrative. The turning point came when Mom looked directly at me and said, "Jessica, I owe you the biggest apology of my life. I let Emma convince me that you didn't love me anymore, and I threw away the daughter who had been taking care of me for years." Mom's tears were heartbreaking, but also healing. For the first time in months, I could see my real mother, not the paranoid, manipulated version Emma had created. "Emma," Mom said finally, "you have 48 hours to move out of this house. I want you gone, and I want you to get help for whatever has made you think this behavior is acceptable." But Emma wasn't finished. Her final act was the most desperate and vindictive yet. Emma's response to being exposed was exactly what I should have expected from someone capable of such elaborate deception. She tried to burn everything down on her way out. "Fine," she screamed at Mom. "You want to choose Jessica over me? You'll regret this when you realize what kind of daughter she really is. I have more evidence that will show you exactly who Jessica has become." Emma stormed out of the room and returned with a laptop, claiming she had real conversations and photos that would prove I was everything she'd said I was. But when she opened the laptop to show her supposed evidence, we discovered that her desperation had made her sloppy. The screen displayed her browser history, which showed multiple visits to fake text message generator websites, photo editing tutorials, and forums about how to discredit someone's reputation. Maya, with her digital marketing background, immediately started documenting everything on the screen. "Emma," Maya said calmly, "your browser history shows that you've been researching how to create fake evidence for months. You literally Googled how to forge someone's signature and creating fake text screenshots." Faced with this undeniable proof of her premeditated deception, Emma finally broke down completely. But instead of showing remorse, she revealed the depth of her resentment and entitlement. "You all act like Jessica is so perfect, but she's not." Emma sobbed. "She got scholarships that should have gone to people who really needed them. She got the job I wanted. She got Dad's approval that I never got. Everything comes easy for her while I have to struggle for everything." "Emma," Uncle Mark said firmly, "Jessica earned those scholarships through hard work. She got that job because she applied herself in college. And she earned Dad's approval by being responsible and caring. That's not fair." Emma's response revealed the core of her problem. She believed she deserved rewards without effort, and she resented anyone who achieved success through hard work. The next 2 days were a whirlwind of legal and practical consequences for Emma. I filed police reports for identity theft, credit fraud, and elder abuse. The bank froze the fraudulent accounts and began the process of removing the debt from my credit report. Mom contacted her doctor about the medication tampering, which resulted in additional charges for endangering a vulnerable adult. Emma's eviction from the house was swift and decisive. Mom had Uncle Mark and 2 male cousins supervise while Emma packed her belongings, ensuring she couldn't steal anything else or plant evidence for future manipulation attempts. "Where am I supposed to go?" Emma demanded during the packing process. "That's not our problem anymore," Mom replied. "You made choices that have consequences. You'll have to figure out how to live with them." Emma tried one last manipulation tactic, claiming she was suicidal and needed family support. But Rachel, with her medical training, quickly determined that Emma was using suicide threats as a manipulation tool rather than expressing genuine mental health concerns. "Emma," Rachel told her bluntly, "threatening suicide to avoid consequences for your actions is emotional manipulation. If you're genuinely having suicidal thoughts, I can connect you with professional resources. But this family is no longer going to be manipulated by threats." The legal consequences came swiftly. Emma was charged with multiple felonies, identity theft, elder abuse, fraud, and conspiracy. The prosecutor was particularly interested in the medication tampering, which qualified as a serious form of elder abuse under state law. Emma's court-appointed attorney advised her to accept a plea deal rather than risk a trial with such overwhelming evidence against her. She pled guilty to reduced charges in exchange for 18 months in prison, 5 years probation, and full financial restitution. The restitution wasn't just for the money she'd stolen, she was also required to pay for Mom's medical evaluation, credit monitoring services for me, and therapy for the family to recover from her psychological manipulation. But the most satisfying consequence was watching Emma face the reality of supporting herself without family resources or stolen money. She had to get a job at a fast food restaurant to pay for basic living expenses while waiting for her sentencing. The woman who had complained that contributing to household responsibilities was beneath her was suddenly working minimum wage jobs and living in a studio apartment she could barely afford. Meanwhile, Mom and I began the process of rebuilding our relationship. The first step was Mom getting a complete medical evaluation to ensure the medication tampering hadn't caused any lasting health effects. Dr. Martinez confirmed that Mom's cognitive function was normal and that the confusion and paranoia had been entirely due to Emma's manipulation of her prescription medications. "Your mother is in excellent health for her age," Dr. Martinez told us. "The personality changes you observed were completely artificial, caused by irregular medication doses. Now that she's back on a proper medication schedule, she should return to her normal mental state within a few weeks." The emotional healing took longer than the physical recovery. Mom struggled with guilt about believing Emma's lies and treating me so poorly. She kept apologizing and asking how she could make up for the months of coldness and suspicion. "Mom," I told her during one of our many conversations, "you were the victim here, not the perpetrator. Emma deliberately manipulated your mental state to make you believe things that weren't true. You can't blame yourself for being deceived by someone you trusted." We started new traditions to rebuild our bond. Weekly mother-daughter dinners where we'd cook together and talk about everything except Emma. Shopping trips where Mom could see firsthand how other people reacted to me, confirming that I was the same person I'd always been, not the selfish daughter Emma had painted me as. The most healing moment came when Mom helped me move back into my childhood bedroom. As we unpacked my belongings and redecorated the space, she told me stories about my childhood that Emma had tried to erase with her lies. "I remember when you were 7 and saved your allowance for 3 months to buy me a Mother's Day present," Mom said, hanging up a photo of us from that long ago Mother's Day. "Emma tried to tell me you'd never cared about making me happy, but I have 20 years of evidence that proves otherwise." I also received unexpected support from community members who had been deceived by Emma's lies. Mom's friends called to apologize for believing negative things about me, neighbors offered to testify about Emma's suspicious behavior, and even some of my old teachers reached out to express their shock at discovering how Emma had misrepresented my character. The financial recovery was substantial. Not only did I get back the money Emma had stolen, but removing the fraudulent debt from my credit report improved my credit score significantly. I was able to qualify for a better apartment when I was ready to move out, and the restitution payments actually helped me build a stronger emergency fund. 6 months after the confrontation, I was sitting on our front porch with Mom, watching the sunset and reflecting on how dramatically our lives had changed. Emma was serving her prison sentence, I had my family relationships back, and we'd all learned valuable lessons about recognizing and confronting manipulation. "Jessica," Mom said, "I want you to know that going through this experience, as terrible as it was, made me realize how lucky I am to have you as a daughter. Emma was right about one thing, you are perfect, but not in the way she meant it. You're perfectly suited to be my daughter, and I'm proud of the woman you've become." Before I finish this incredible story, I have to ask you something that's been on my mind throughout this entire experience. Have you ever discovered that someone you loved was living a complete lie? Have you ever had to choose between keeping family peace and protecting yourself from someone who was hurting you? And most importantly, do you think Emma deserved the consequences she faced, or should family members get more chances to change their behavior? This experience taught me that love doesn't mean accepting abuse, even from family members. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is hold people accountable for their actions and refuse to enable destructive behavior. If this story made you think about your own family relationships, or if you just enjoyed watching justice get served in the most satisfying way possible, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about family drama, personal justice, and standing up for yourself. Share this with anyone who needs to hear that it's okay to fight for the truth, even when it's difficult and painful. Sometimes the people who claim to love us are the ones causing us the most harm, but that doesn't mean we have to accept that treatment. Thank you for joining me on this journey of betrayal, discovery, and ultimate justice. Remember, the truth always comes out eventually, and protecting yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next story.